The elevator chimed as it reached the 50th floor, and Sophia stepped out, her cleaning cart rattling slightly as one of the wheels snagged on the metal groove between the doors. She didn't notice. Her head was already full, lists, tasks, don't mess up reminders looping through her brain as they had all week since she started at Sterling Enterprises. The marble floors gleamed too much under the overhead lights, the silence too complete. Her sneakers made soft sounds that bounced off the glass walls and steel accents like she didn't belong there. She checked her clipboard again. 49th floor. She frowned, confused, but the hall ahead looked the same as every other one she'd cleaned since Monday. Frosted glass doors, golden plaques with names she didn't recognize, everything pristine and impersonal. She pushed forward anyway. The sooner she got started, the sooner she could get home, rinse off the lemon-scented disinfectant that clung to her fingers, and maybe sleep. The last office on the left had no nameplate. The door was slightly ajar. That wasn't typical. She knocked gently, waited. Nothing. She pushed it open. The room was enormous. Not just big, absurd. Sofas near the window, a small bar cart near a leather armchair, wall-to-wall bookshelves in dark wood, a modern fireplace set flush into black stone, and in the center of it all, a wide, sleek desk that seemed almost untouched. A strange heat crept into her neck. This wasn't a middle manager's office. No, this was something else. Still, she didn't question it. Not out loud. She stepped inside, careful to move quietly. The view from the window was sharp, sprawling. Midtown lit up like a jewelry box, the river in the distance, steady and indifferent. She'd never seen the city from this high before. She cleaned automatically, sanitizing the phone receiver, polishing the surface of the desk with short, circular strokes. It was oddly clean already, though. Like no one worked here. But someone must. Someone powerful. At the bookshelf, she paused to straighten the spines of a row of hardcovers. One sat slightly askew. She slid it back into place, but it stuck. Curious, she tugged the whole row out slightly, revealing a thin crack in the back panel. Her breath hitched. It was nothing, probably, but something about it felt off. She moved to the desk again. Her cloth had picked up almost no dust. It was strange. Most offices, no matter how polished, had signs of life, scattered pens, half-used notepads, phone cords stretched in odd directions. But here, everything was aligned with surgical precision. On the left side of the desk, a drawer was slightly open. She hadn't noticed it at first. It wasn't even fully cracked, just enough to catch the light when she leaned down to wipe the edge. She stared at it for a moment, weighing the decision. It didn't look locked. It didn't look like something she should be touching either. But her hand moved anyway, fingertips brushing the cool metal handle. Inside was nothing out of the ordinary at first, some papers, an unused notebook, a closed envelope. Then, nestled beneath a black leather folder, a small silver frame. She pulled it out without thinking, then froze. The girl in the picture had a soft, lopsided smile, caught mid-laugh. Her hair was pulled into a messy ponytail. She was wearing a red tank top with a tear near the seam. Sophia remembered it well. She'd worn it too often the summer she worked upstate at a lakefront diner, the only job she could get that didn't require a polished resume. The background of the photo showed the boardwalk, a painted sign for fried clams, and blurred figures walking behind her. She remembered that exact day, though no one had taken her picture. She'd been 17. She remembered feeling free and exhausted, balancing 3 trays during lunch rush and trying not to burn under the sun. Her hands began to shake. There was no reason for this photo to exist. No one she'd known that summer had a camera. And even if they had, why would this be here? In the desk drawer of the CEO of Sterling Enterprises? She dropped the frame. It landed with a soft clink on the desk. Panic surged, pure and electric. She slammed the drawer shut, backed away so fast her hip hit the edge of the desk. She grabbed her cloth, threw it in the cart, and pushed it toward the door as fast as the wheels would allow. Halfway down the hall, she broke into a full sprint, abandoning the cart entirely in front of the elevator. She hit the down button repeatedly, eyes darting down the hallway like someone might come out and stop her. But no one did. The office door remained closed. The lights were unchanged. Everything still looked normal. Except it wasn't. Back on the 49th floor, she retrieved her cart in silence, and cleaned the assigned offices like she was sleepwalking. She didn't process anything. Her brain kept circling the image of her face, her younger self, smiling in a photo she didn't remember being taken, hidden away in a drawer that wasn't meant to be opened. That night she barely slept. She pulled out old journals, photo albums, anything that might contain a clue. Nothing. No photos matched it. No mention of someone taking a picture that day. She called her roommate, Naomi, and almost asked something, but stopped. What could she even say? The next morning, she stared at the company logo on her badge with a sense of nausea. Sterling Enterprises. She'd only gotten the assignment through her agency a week ago. She didn't even know what floor the CEO worked on. She'd assumed he was on 49, like the rest of upper management. Her clipboard had said 49. Had she really pressed the wrong button? Or had she been sent there? She couldn't shake the sense that something wasn't right. There was no reason for someone like Alexander Sterling, someone she'd never met, whose life was galaxies apart from hers, to have anything of hers. Let alone a personal photo taken without her knowledge. She checked her phone. No messages. No calls. No update from the agency. For a moment, she considered quitting. Walking away. Let someone else clean glass towers filled with secrets. But then another thought crept in, darker, sharper. What if it wasn't a mistake? What if he wanted her to find it? Sophia didn't sleep much the night after she found the photo. Every time she closed her eyes, the image appeared again, her own face frozen in time, smiling as if she'd known something she'd long since forgotten. By morning, the heaviness in her chest hadn't lifted. The rational part of her wanted to believe it was a coincidence, some mix-up, maybe a mistake. But there was nothing accidental about how that drawer had been left slightly open. Nothing ordinary about a billionaire CEO keeping a framed photo of a teenage waitress hidden under official-looking documents. She considered not going back. She even picked up her phone and hovered over the cleaning agency's number, ready to make up an excuse about a family emergency, or the flu. But the truth was, she couldn't afford to lose the job. Her mom's treatment bills had started stacking again after insurance backed out on a technicality. It wasn't just about paying rent anymore. Every shift meant a little more time, a little more help keeping things stable. And so, later that evening, she took the subway uptown and walked through the lobby of Sterling Enterprises like nothing had changed. She avoided the 50th floor entirely. Didn't even glance at the elevator panel past the 49th button. When she arrived on her assigned floor, the sense of normalcy helped settle her. Most of the staff had gone home. The cleaning team worked quietly, divided across departments. She stuck to the routine: keycard, cart, wipe, vacuum, reset. But even as her hands moved, her mind drifted. The photo had cracked something loose. It had been almost a decade since that summer. She hadn't thought about it in a long time. 17, restless, eager to escape Queens for a few months. She'd taken the waitress job at the lake resort on a whim. The pay was bad, the hours were worse, but the scenery had made it tolerable: calm water, thick pines, air that smelled clean no matter how many eggs she fried or trays she balanced. He had shown up during the third week of August. Alone. Dressed like someone who didn't need to ask how much things cost. He always sat on the deck, ordered black coffee in the mornings and scotch at night. She only learned his name from the hotel registry when she was tasked with delivering towels. Sterling. He barely spoke but watched everything. Especially her. The memory unsettled her now. She remembered feeling flattered at first, even curious. He was young, maybe early 20s then, and had the kind of face that didn't look like it belonged in that sleepy lakeside town. He carried a leather sketchbook everywhere. She caught him drawing once but didn't say anything. When she walked past, he'd shut it quickly, like it was private. One afternoon, when her shift ended, she'd sat at the edge of the dock sketching lilies with a dull pencil and a paper napkin. He watched from a distance. She remembered that moment clearly. The silence between them had been, not uncomfortable exactly, but charged. Like something was waiting to happen. Then, the next day, he was gone. No checkout, no note. Just disappeared. She hadn't even thought to look him up until now. Back home after her shift, Sophia sat cross-legged on her bed, a bowl of instant noodles growing cold beside her laptop. It didn't take long. The name popped up with hundreds of results. Alexander Sterling, CEO of Sterling Enterprises. Billionaire investor. Discreet, press-averse, rarely photographed. But in the few images available, it was undeniably him. Older, sharper, but the same man who used to sketch her from across the patio while she refilled the sugar caddies. She felt sick. She didn't know what unsettled her more, that he'd remembered her all this time, or that he'd done nothing until now. Why keep her photo? Why leave it where she could find it? Unless it hadn't been an accident. Unless he wanted her to see it. The next few days passed uneventfully, but her nerves didn't settle. She kept expecting something, an email, a question from her supervisor, even a strange phone call. But nothing came. And yet, every time she entered the building, she felt watched. Not in an obvious way. Just an undercurrent, like someone knew where she was at all times. On Thursday, near the end of her shift, she turned a corner too fast and nearly collided with someone stepping out of an office. Tall. Tailored suit. Silver cufflinks. She stopped cold. "Sorry," she said quickly, stepping aside. Her voice barely came out. Alexander Sterling didn't say anything at first. His gaze swept over her, calm and unreadable. Then, a polite nod. "No harm done." She hesitated. This close, he looked different than she remembered, not younger, not older, just more contained. Every movement was deliberate, his expression blank like a man who'd been trained out of showing emotion. But there was something else, too. A pause that lingered too long. Like recognition held just behind his eyes. Sophia forced herself to keep walking. That night, she couldn't stop thinking about it. The way he looked at her, not startled, not curious, but too calm. Too measured. He knew exactly who she was. And yet he hadn't said a word. She dreamed about the lake resort. But it wasn't peaceful this time. In the dream, she stood by the dock again. Only this time he was closer, sketching her face with bold strokes. When she moved toward him, he held up the drawing, her eyes blank, her mouth twisted in a half-smile that didn't look like hers. She woke up drenched in sweat. Sophia pulled the sheets around her shoulders and sat in the dark, staring at the window. The city outside was still alive, even at 4 a.m. Cars passed, lights blinked, life continued. But inside her apartment, it felt like time had folded back in on itself. Like she'd stepped into some story she hadn't agreed to join. She didn't know what he wanted. Maybe nothing. Maybe it was just one of those strange, tangled things in life, a missed connection revisited too late. But it didn't feel random. Not the drawer. Not the photo. Not the look he gave her. What bothered her most was how much it had unsettled her. He hadn't touched her. Hadn't said anything inappropriate. And yet her sense of safety, of distance, was gone. It wasn't fear exactly, but a kind of unease she couldn't name. Like he knew too much about her already, and she didn't even know where he lived, what he liked, whether he remembered the exact way she'd once looked when she dropped a plate of onion rings into the lake and laughed about it for the next 3 tables. The more she thought about it, the more she realized she wasn't just confused. She was angry. Because while she'd moved on with her life, scraped by, taken odd jobs, and worried about bills, he'd become one of the most powerful men in the country. And still, somehow, he had something of hers. Not the other way around. And now she didn't know if he'd been waiting for her all this time, or if she'd walked straight into something she couldn't walk back out of. Sophia went through the rest of the week in a daze, doing her job with mechanical precision, while her thoughts wandered back to the man in the hallway. Every time she thought she could push the whole thing out of her head, something would drag it back: the photo, the sketchbook she remembered from the resort, the way he looked at her like she wasn't just another cleaner in a uniform. It unsettled her more than she wanted to admit, but curiosity had started digging its hooks into her too. She needed to know what it meant. Why he kept that photo. Why now? On Monday, her phone buzzed just before her shift. It was a message from someone in human resources at Sterling. A polite invitation, phrased like an offer she could turn down but clearly wasn't. They were organizing a company-sponsored charity event, an art gala, to be held in the executive lounge in 2 weeks, and since she'd demonstrated great attention to detail, she was being asked to assist with the initial setup, off the clock but well compensated. The message ended with, "Per request of Mr. Sterling." Her first instinct was to decline, delete the message, pretend she never saw it. She'd signed up to clean floors, not rub elbows with men who kept framed photos of her without explanation. But the thought of confronting him, even indirectly, kept her from saying no. Maybe this would give her the chance to ask, quietly, away from security cameras or official complaints, what he thought he was doing. She responded with a simple, "Yes, I'm available," and then immediately regretted it. The day of the setup, she wore her best attempt at business casual, a navy blouse, slacks that almost fit, and flats that didn't squeak. She showed up early, hoping to blend in and stay invisible, but that hope vanished when a tall man in a suit appeared beside her just minutes after she arrived. "Ms. Morales?" he said. "Mr. Sterling will join you shortly. He asks that you assist him directly with reviewing some of the artwork being considered for display." She nodded without speaking, then followed the assistant, if that's what he was, to the 50th floor. Her palms were damp. Her stomach knotted tighter with each step. She hadn't been back since that night, and now she was walking in with an invitation. The office looked the same. Impossibly pristine. This time, she was escorted to a side lounge just beyond the main space. It had high ceilings, massive windows, and 2 easels set up beside a sleek table with art catalogs stacked in neat piles. Alexander stood beside the glass, talking quietly into a phone. When he saw her, he ended the call without finishing the sentence. "Sophia," he said. No last name. Just that. Like they already knew each other. She forced herself to stay calm. "You wanted help with the event?" He smiled slightly, as if amused by how directly she'd said it. "Yes. I thought you might have an eye for these things." He gestured to the table. "We're deciding on which pieces from the private collection to lend to the gala. Some of the staff are already voting, but I thought someone outside the executive bubble might offer a different perspective." She moved toward the table and picked up a catalog. "You have a private collection?" "Not all of it's mine. Some pieces are owned by the firm. Some were donations. But yes, I've acquired a few over the years." She didn't know what she'd expected, but certainly not this, him standing there like nothing was strange, like this was normal. The confidence in his voice was steady, not smug. Just calm. Controlled. It made her more nervous than if he'd come on strong or acted obvious. She leafed through a few pages, stopping at a minimalist watercolor of 2 figures sitting at a lakeside. It wasn't especially striking, but something about the brushwork reminded her of the resort. He stepped beside her. "That one's from a young artist in Montreal. Painted it when she was 18. Said she didn't know what she was trying to say with it, only that she needed to get it out." "She said that?" "She wrote it on the back of the frame." Sophia nodded slowly and closed the book. They went on like that for 20 minutes, quiet, almost clinical. He showed her pieces. She gave short opinions. She tried not to think about how surreal it felt, standing next to someone who had once silently sketched her and then vanished for years. He didn't bring it up. He didn't act like he knew her at all. But every so often, she caught him watching her, not leering or intense, just watching. And it made her skin prickle. When they'd gone through the third catalog, he set it down and asked if she'd like to see a few pieces in person. She hesitated. He tilted his head slightly toward the hallway. They're kept in my office. Of course they are, she thought. She hesitated, then followed him back into the main space. The drawer was closed now. She glanced at it briefly. He noticed. He gestured to the far wall, where a few canvases were mounted in a staggered row. One was a mixed-media piece with charcoal and paint, abstract but expressive. Another was a blurry portrait in reds and yellows. And the third, she didn't recognize it at first. It was more detailed, more refined. A girl sitting alone on a wooden dock, sketchpad balanced on her knees, her head bent in focus. Sophia stepped closer. I bought it from a private seller about 5 years ago, he said behind her. The artist never named it. But I've always called it August. She didn't answer. He took a step forward. You remind me of someone I once knew. She turned. That's not what this is. You don't get to pretend this is some coincidence. You had a photo of me in your drawer. He didn't flinch. I did. Her heart beat faster. Why? There was a pause. Not long. But long enough to feel like the moment teetered on something. Because I've been looking for you, he said. For 7 years. The words were simple. No theatrics. No build-up. He said them like he was stating a fact. Sophia blinked slowly, letting the silence stretch. Why? I met you that summer, he said. At the resort. I watched you draw. I was going through a time when everything felt hollow. And then, for 1 week, I saw someone who looked completely alive. She shook her head. You didn't even talk to me. I didn't need to. That's not how real life works. I know. She crossed her arms. So what now? You find me again by accident and think what? That I'll just fall into place because it makes a good story? No, he said. I didn't expect anything. I thought you were gone. Then I saw your name on a staff list. I didn't even believe it was you until I saw you in person. And the photo? He exhaled slowly. Taken the day before I left. I snapped it while you were looking at something on the boardwalk. I kept it because I didn't want to forget how that week felt. She didn't know what to say to that. It was insane. It was surreal. But worst of all, it was real. The drawer behind her stayed closed. Neither of them moved toward it. After a while, she said, This isn't some fairy tale. I know, he replied. That's not what I want. She turned and walked to the door. He didn't stop her. But he didn't need to. She knew she'd come back. Whether to fight him, question him, or something else entirely, she wasn't sure yet. But it wasn't over. Not now. Sophia didn't sleep the night after their conversation. She replayed his words again and again, trying to make sense of them, trying to find the cracks. There had to be something wrong in it, some false note, some manipulation. But the way he'd said it, calm and unembellished, made it hard to dismiss. It wasn't just that he'd remembered her. It was the way he'd held on to the memory like it had weight. Like it had shaped something in him. That was the part she couldn't wrap her head around. The world didn't work like that. Not for people like her. And certainly not when the other person was someone like him. She didn't go back to the office the next day. She called the agency and asked to switch back to the lower floors. They said the request would be noted, but for now she should show up as assigned. She hung up without arguing. She didn't want to see him. Not yet. But she couldn't sit still either. She paced the apartment, cleaned things that didn't need cleaning, reorganized the spice rack twice. Naomi watched her from the kitchen table, sipping tea and trying not to ask questions. Eventually, Sophia sat down and opened her laptop. The same search bar blinked back at her. Alexander Sterling paintings. She hesitated. Then typed it in. Dozens of results appeared. Interviews, gallery articles, auction records. She hadn't known he was an artist, not in any official way. Apparently he didn't promote his work under his full name. Most listings just said, A. Sterling, or Private Collection, Anonymous Donor. But there were images, grainy and compressed, and one caught her attention immediately. A charcoal sketch. Woman sitting in a chair, face half turned, mouth caught in a small, quiet curve. It wasn't exact. Not a copy of the photo she'd found in the drawer. But it was her. Not just in the shape of her features, but in the posture, the tilt of her head, the way her arms hung loose at her sides. She clicked through to the article. It had been part of an exhibit 5 years ago. No mention of who she was. She sat back and stared at the screen. This wasn't just about one photo. He'd drawn her more than once. And he'd shown it. Sold it. Turned her into art without asking. The anger came slow but deep. Not loud. Just steady. She closed the laptop and stood, needing air. Naomi glanced up. Want company? No. But Naomi followed her onto the fire escape anyway, sitting on the rusted metal and pulling her legs up beneath her. Sophia lit a cigarette. She didn't smoke often, but she kept the pack in a drawer for nights like this. Nights when nothing made sense. After a while, Naomi spoke. So want to tell me why you're vibrating like someone plugged you into a socket? Sophia let the smoke drift upward. Do you remember that summer I worked upstate? The lake place? Yeah. There was this guy. Quiet. Rich. Drew a lot. Never talked to anyone. Naomi tilted her head. The one who left without saying anything? Sophia nodded. He's the CEO of the company I'm working at now. Naomi sat back. Seriously? Yeah. Okay. That's weird. That's not even the weird part. She told her everything. The photo. The office. The gallery article. The way he looked at her like she was part of a story he'd never stopped telling himself. When she finished, Naomi let out a slow breath. You're the muse of a billionaire. That's gotta mean something. Sophia laughed once, dry and humorless. It means he's got too much time and not enough boundaries. Maybe. Or maybe it means you made more of an impression than you thought. I was a waitress. So? I didn't do anything. You existed. Apparently that was enough. Sophia dropped the cigarette, crushed it under her heel. I should be creeped out. I am creeped out. And pissed. But also, I don't know. You like the attention. I don't know if it's that. It's more like... She broke off, searching for the right words. Like part of me never left that week. And now I'm being dragged back into it without warning. Naomi nudged her shoulder. So what are you going to do? I don't know. Avoid him, maybe. That night, she stayed up sketching for the first time in years. She didn't even think about it at first, just picked up a pencil and started moving it across the page. The lines were shaky at first, but then her hand settled into a rhythm. She didn't draw herself. She didn't draw him either. She drew the view from the dock, the one from memory, right before the sky turned orange. She stayed there until the light outside turned blue. 2 days later, a package arrived. No return address. Medium-sized box, carefully wrapped in plain brown paper. She opened it on the kitchen counter, slicing through the tape with a butter knife. Inside was a canvas, wrapped in tissue. No note. She peeled the paper back and froze. It was her. Not a copy of the photo. Not one of the sketches from the gallery. This was new. Painted in layers, smooth and deliberate, her face tilted slightly upward, light catching on the edge of her cheek. But what struck her most wasn't the accuracy, it was the finish. Her face was covered in gold leaf. Not gaudy or excessive, just a soft shimmer that caught the light when she moved the canvas. Naomi leaned over her shoulder. That's not creepy at all. Sophia didn't answer. She couldn't stop staring at it. You keeping it? She didn't respond right away. She didn't know what she was supposed to feel. He'd sent it anonymously, but there was no question where it came from. No one else could have done this. He hadn't signed it. He hadn't asked for a response. She carried the painting into her room and leaned it against the far wall. She didn't hang it. Didn't hide it either. Later that night, when the apartment was quiet, she sat in front of it and looked at the face she didn't quite recognize anymore. It looked like her, but it also looked like someone else, someone who hadn't been afraid to be seen. And she realized she wasn't angry anymore. Not exactly. Just off balance. Like the ground beneath her had shifted slightly, and she hadn't figured out where to plant her feet again. She didn't know what he wanted from her. She wasn't even sure what she wanted. But whatever this was, it wasn't going away. Sophia didn't mention the painting to anyone else. She left it against the wall in her bedroom, where it quietly took up space and demanded none. Still, every time she passed it, something shifted in her. Not pride. Not unease. Something between them. He hadn't signed it, hadn't even confirmed it was from him, but there was no need. The way her hair fell across her shoulder, the faint trace of her collarbone, the shadow under her chin, it was all so precise, so familiar. It wasn't just about likeness. It was how he saw her. How he remembered her. She waited a week before messaging him. It was short. I want to talk. Not at work. He didn't reply immediately. But the next morning, a driver waited outside her building. Unmarked car, polite man in a suit who opened the door and said nothing else. She climbed in without asking questions. He took her to a part of the city she didn't recognize at first, a quiet street with no signs and buildings that looked too old and too clean to be anything but expensive. The car stopped in front of a door hidden between two shuttered storefronts. The driver gestured, and she went in. Inside was nothing like she'd expected. A long staircase led down to what looked like a forgotten bar from another century, dim lights, wood paneling, a piano no one played, and glass shelves lined with bottles that probably cost more than her entire rent. It was empty except for Alexander, seated in a booth in the back with two glasses already poured. I thought you might hate this, he said as she approached. But I wanted somewhere quiet. She sat across from him without taking the drink. I almost didn't come. I wouldn't have blamed you. But I did. He didn't press. They sat for a while, the hum of silence not quite uncomfortable. Eventually, she reached for the glass. So, this is what billionaires do? Secret bars and anonymous paintings? Sometimes, he said. But mostly I answer emails and deal with board members who think they're clever. Sounds fun. It isn't. That made her smile, despite herself. They didn't talk about the photo or the drawer. Not directly. Instead, they circled each other slowly, asking half questions, sharing pieces of stories. She told him about the summer job, about her mom getting sick again, about putting off art school because it felt like a fantasy that belonged to someone else. He told her about the gallery show he pulled at the last minute after the press found out who he was. About a woman who said she loved his work, then sold the story to a tabloid for a payday. About how trust, once broken, leaves a kind of silence in a person that doesn't fill back up. I don't let many people close, he said. It's easier not to. So why me? He looked at her for a long time, then said, You were never afraid to disappear. Even back then. Everyone wanted something. You just wanted to draw. I still do. He nodded. Good. After that, they started meeting more often. Always privately. Once in the same speakeasy, sometimes in the rooftop garden of a hotel he owned but rarely visited. She never asked how he got access. He never offered details. But the meetings were quiet, stripped of noise, and she began to see him not as the name or the company or even the man who painted her, but someone worn down by the same kind of loneliness she thought only people like her experienced. He didn't act like someone trying to impress her. If anything, he seemed cautious, careful with his words. He asked more than he offered, listened more than he spoke. And when he did talk about himself, it was never the polished version. He shared the quiet things, missing his mother, feeling trapped by money, not knowing what to do with a life that had become too managed to feel real. One night they danced. The speakeasy was technically closed, but the bartender let them stay after hours. A slow song played over the sound system, something old and sleepy. She hadn't danced in years. Her shoes pinched, and she was terrible at following his lead, but he didn't seem to care. His hand was warm at the small of her back, and for the first time since this whole strange thing had started, she stopped thinking. Just moved with him. Just let it happen. Later, walking her to the car, he brushed a strand of hair off her cheek and said, "I don't want this to be a passing thing." Sophia hesitated. "I'm not someone you can just keep." "I know that. I want to finish school. I want to work for myself. I'm not going to play house or disappear into your world." "Then don't. You say that now." "I mean it." They didn't kiss then. Not yet. It was close, but not quite. The kiss came 2 weeks later, after another quiet dinner, another unplanned hour on a rooftop bench. It was raining, not hard, just a steady drizzle that slicked the concrete and made the air smell sharp. She was laughing at something he'd said, something small, and then he leaned in without asking, without hesitation. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't tentative. It just felt right, and when she kissed him back, everything slowed down like a hinge swinging into place. After that, they saw each other more openly, still not at the office, never where anyone could snap a photo or ask questions, but less careful. Less afraid. He made time. She asked for space when she needed it, and he gave it. They didn't label it. It wasn't about labels. It was about wanting the same thing at the same time, and letting that be enough for now. But not everyone was happy about it. Marla had worked for Alexander for nearly a decade. She was efficient, loyal, always one step ahead of his needs. She kept his schedule, guarded his time, made sure the world ran the way he wanted it to. She noticed everything. She noticed when he started clearing hours in the middle of the day, when he began canceling meetings he used to take without question. She noticed the changes in his voice, the way he softened around the edges when talking to no one in particular. And one afternoon, she followed him. She didn't call it that, not to herself. She simply happened to leave the office shortly after him, happened to take the elevator to the lobby, happened to step outside in time to see him holding the door open for Sophia, his hand resting briefly at her lower back before she slid into the car. It wasn't jealousy in the usual sense. It was deeper than that. She'd given everything to him, years of work, energy, loyalty, and never asked for more than respect. But she'd always assumed she mattered more than the rest. That if there was anyone he could trust, it was her. Watching him with Sophia made something in her tighten. He was letting someone in. Someone new. Someone who hadn't earned it. Later that night, Marla sat at her desk long after everyone else had gone home. She opened a blank document and started typing a memo. It was harmless. Just a note about employee conduct, about possible conflicts of interest. She phrased it carefully, not accusing anyone of anything, just raising awareness. Just protecting the company. She didn't sign it. She didn't need to. And Sophia, unaware of any of it, still thought the hardest part of this was learning to trust him. The kiss stayed with Sophia longer than she expected. Even after days had passed, the memory crept in during the most ordinary moments, brushing her teeth, folding laundry, slicing vegetables with a dull knife. It wasn't just the kiss itself, but the weight behind it. The way Alexander had said, "A beginning," like he meant it. Like he wanted this to become something more than a brief, strange entanglement. For the first time since she met him, she wasn't confused about what she wanted. She wasn't even afraid of wanting it. They met a few more times after that night. Nothing grand. No formal dinners or private jets, just quiet corners of the city and late-night phone calls that blurred into sleep. She still cleaned offices 5 nights a week, and he still ran a company that functioned like its own country, but somehow they made space for each other. She didn't tell Naomi much, just enough to keep her from prying. She wasn't ready to define it out loud. But that didn't mean the world wasn't already trying to define it for her. It started subtly. A few strange glances from other staff in the elevator. Conversations that paused the moment she entered a room. The woman from reception, who used to be indifferent, now smiled too tightly, asked too many questions. Then came the sudden schedule shift. An email from the agency said her assignment at Sterling Enterprises had ended. No explanation. Just a polite thank you and a line about future placement being reviewed. Sophia stared at the message for a long time, her hand frozen over the mouse. She hadn't missed a single shift. She was never late. No complaints. She tried calling her manager, but it went to voicemail. When she finally got someone on the phone, they told her the request had come from Sterling's HR department. Officially, it was a restructuring of contractor services. Unofficially, no one would say anything else. She didn't call Alexander right away. Some part of her didn't want to believe it was related. But that part vanished when she logged onto her old employee portal to check her hours, and found her name listed under a note. Do not reassign. Internal conflict. That night she sat on her bed and stared at the wall, her chest tight and heavy. She thought about every moment she'd spent with him. Every word. The slow unfolding of something she thought might be real. Had it all been a game? Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She opened the message without thinking. Don't flatter yourself. He always finds a new muse. They never last. She stared at it, then read it again. Her stomach turned. She didn't need to ask who M was. Marla. The assistant. The woman who always stood too close to him, who knew all his passwords and travel plans, who'd probably watched them together without ever saying a word. Sophia deleted the message, turned off her phone, and curled up on the couch, unable to sleep. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just lay there, frozen in the realization that maybe she'd never had a chance. Maybe the entire time, she'd been living in someone else's story, and the ending had already been written. The next morning, Alexander called. She let it ring. He tried again that night. Again the next day. Finally, on the third attempt, she answered. Why was I pulled from my contract? She asked, skipping past pleasantries. He didn't speak for a moment. Then, I didn't know. Not until yesterday. I tried to reverse it, but HR, you're the CEO. Don't act like you couldn't stop it. I'm telling you the truth. I don't believe you. Sophia. No, she said, voice low and steady. If you're ashamed of being seen with someone like me, just say it. If this was a mistake, just say that too. His silence said more than any excuse could. She hung up before he could recover. Later that day, Marla walked into his office carrying a manila folder. She placed it on the desk, but before she could leave, Alexander spoke. You reassigned her. She paused. Excuse me? Don't play dumb. I know you had her pulled. I'm your assistant. I act in your best interest. Was it my best interest when you sent her that message? Her eyes narrowed. So she told you. She didn't have to. Marla stepped forward, her expression unreadable. I've protected you for years. You think this girl is different, but she's not. They all come around eventually. You give them a little attention, and suddenly they're everywhere. Wanting access. Position. Influence. She never asked me for anything. Not yet. But she would have. They always do. He stood, voice low but sharp. You don't get to decide who matters to me. Marla's tone changed, brittle now. I've seen you lose everything before. You get reckless with your feelings, and people take advantage. I was trying to keep you from making another mistake. He shook his head. You made one instead. She stared at him for a long time. You think this is love? You don't even know her. Maybe not. But I knew what she gave me when she didn't even try to. Marla left without another word. That night, Alexander didn't call again. He knew it was too late. Sophia spent the evening sketching. Not because she wanted to, but because it was the only way she could quiet her thoughts. The lines came slowly at first, then faster, until the page was filled with a woman sitting alone at a train station, her suitcase beside her, face turned away from the tracks. It wasn't meant to be self-portrait, but when she looked at it later, she saw herself in the shape of the shoulders. Naomi sat beside her without saying anything, watching her draw. "He did something," Sophia said quietly. "I figured. Someone made sure I wouldn't be allowed near him again. And I don't think he fought it. You want to be with someone who lets that happen? I thought I did. I don't know. I thought I was different." Naomi put a hand on her shoulder. "You were. That's the part they don't understand." Sophia didn't reply. She didn't need to. Because somewhere deep down, she knew she hadn't been part of a mistake. She'd been part of something real. And now it was broken. The sketch of the woman at the train station sat on Sophia's desk for nearly a week before she did anything with it. She didn't touch it, didn't move it, didn't even look at it most days. But it stayed there, a quiet presence in the room, the way a closed door still holds the weight of everything unsaid behind it. For a while, she thought about throwing it away. Then one morning, without overthinking it, she scanned it, cropped the edges, and uploaded it to a new social account she'd created under a different name. No bio, no face, just the image and a caption, "Leaving isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the only thing that saves you." She shut her laptop and went about her day. 2 nights later, her phone lit up with a notification. Someone had reposted it. Then another. Then a message from someone she didn't know. "This made me cry. Thank you." Within a week, it had been shared thousands of times. Art blogs picked it up. A few asked if they could feature it. She agreed cautiously. She didn't want to be a brand or an inspiration. She just wanted to draw and not feel like her work only mattered when it came through someone else's voice. So she posted more. Sketches she'd started and never finished. Faces from memory. Imagined places. Small stories told in pencil and charcoal. Nothing elaborate. Nothing polished. But it resonated. More messages came. People asked for prints. Someone asked if she would ever show in person. Naomi helped her find a tiny gallery space in Brooklyn. It was part of a co-op, shared by 5 other artists, and barely big enough to hold 20 people at once. She hung her work carefully, not expecting anything. She didn't send out invites. She told herself she didn't care who showed up. But the night of the opening, the room was full. People lingered longer than she expected. A few asked about commissions. A woman bought 3 prints and said her teenage daughter had cried when she saw the one with the girl on the dock. Sophia didn't say much, just nodded, wrote down the woman's name, and handed her a paper bag with the pieces wrapped inside. She was behind the folding table when she saw him. Alexander had always blended into the room in his own way, never loud, never flashy, but impossible to ignore once he was there. He didn't approach her. He stood near the back, looking at a piece she hadn't titled, the one she'd almost left out. It was a woman walking alone in a crowded street, every passerby drawn in blurred lines while she stood in sharp focus, her expression unreadable. Sophia didn't move. Didn't acknowledge him. She turned back to a customer and finished the transaction. When she looked again, he was gone. Later, after the last guest left and Naomi helped her load the leftover flyers into a tote, she found an envelope tucked under the corner of the table. No name. Just her. Inside was a note written on thick, textured paper. It said, "Your work made me feel something for the first time in years. Don't stop now." There was a gallery receipt attached. All 7 of her original framed pieces had been purchased. Every single one. The name on the buyer's slip had been left blank. She didn't cry. She didn't call him. But when she got home that night, she took the train station sketch out of its protective sleeve and hung it on her wall properly, not just leaning it against something. It felt earned. Things shifted after that. Not overnight, but gradually. She got an offer to join an artist's residency. A small one, but fully funded. She started working part-time at a local nonprofit arts center, helping with after-school workshops for kids. She still lived in the same apartment, still boiled pasta too often and ran out of groceries at least once a week, but something had opened up in her. Like the life she'd assumed was too far away to reach had started to step toward her instead. She didn't see Alexander again for weeks. Then one Friday evening, she was invited to a gala by a local arts foundation. Naomi had connections and insisted she come. Sophia almost backed out at the last minute, but she'd promised to bring her sketchbook to donate to the silent auction, and she didn't want to flake. She wore a dress she hadn't touched in years and borrowed heels she couldn't walk in. She stayed near the back, sipping flat champagne and trying not to make eye contact with the photographers. The woman approached her out of nowhere, all pearls and grace, holding a glass of water with lemon. She looked familiar, but Sophia couldn't place her. "You're Sophia Morales?" she asked. Sophia nodded, unsure. The woman smiled. "I've been hoping to meet you. I'm Elizabeth Sterling. Alexander's mother?" Sophia froze. "He speaks about you," the woman went on, unbothered by Sophia's stunned silence. "Not often, but when he does, I know. There's a difference in his voice. I haven't seen him smile like that in a decade." Sophia didn't know how to respond. "He's stubborn," Elizabeth said gently. "But not careless. If he let you walk away, it wasn't because he didn't care. It was because he thought it would protect you. Or maybe protect himself. Either way, I'm glad to finally put a face to the name." She touched Sophia's arm lightly, then disappeared into the crowd, leaving her standing there, unsure of what had just happened. The ride home was quiet. She didn't tell Naomi about the conversation. She needed to sit with it first. Just past midnight, the rain started, light at first, then heavier. She didn't hear it until there was a knock at the door. Sophia opened it, and found him standing there, soaked through, hair dripping into the collar of his jacket. No driver, no umbrella, no assistant hovering nearby. Just him. He didn't speak right away. Just looked at her, like he was seeing her for the first time again. "I know I messed it up," he said finally. "I let people interfere. I thought I was protecting you from a world that would chew you up the way it chewed me. I didn't think you needed me to fight for you. But I was wrong." She stood in the doorway, rain pooling around his shoes, her hands still on the knob. "You're not my muse anymore, Sophia," he said. "You're my future. If you'll have me." The words didn't rush out. They weren't desperate. Just certain. And she believed him. She stepped aside and let him in. He stepped inside, dripping water onto the old rug by her door, but neither of them moved to do anything about it. Sophia stood across from him, arms crossed loosely, watching as he peeled off his coat and placed it gently on the hook by the wall. He didn't ask if he could stay. She didn't tell him to leave. The rain clattered against the windows as if giving them time to decide what came next. They didn't speak much that night. There wasn't a long conversation about what had happened or how it had all gone wrong. It didn't feel necessary. They sat on the couch in silence for a while, his hand eventually finding hers, and she let it. When she leaned her head against his shoulder, he didn't say a word, just let the moment sit. It wasn't a clean slate or some grand apology, but it was enough for now. In the weeks that followed, they didn't rush. Sophia insisted on space, and Alexander gave it. She didn't want to fall back into anything without knowing where her feet were this time. He invited her to things, quiet dinners, museum exhibits before they opened to the public, a day trip upstate that ended with her sketching wildflowers while he read beside her. She didn't accept every invitation, but she didn't say no to all of them either. What changed was how she approached him. Not as someone she had to impress or measure herself against, but as someone she could choose if she wanted. That shift made all the difference. He didn't try to win her back with money or gestures. Instead, he showed up, steadily, without pressure, without the edges that had once made her wary. It took time, but she started trusting it. Not long after, she began talking to an old contact from the community center Naomi volunteered at. They'd always wanted to expand their art programming but lacked resources. Sophia offered to help build something from the ground up, a small art school, flexible for kids, adults, anyone who needed a creative outlet but never had the access. The pitch was simple: no gatekeeping, no fancy resumes, just space and supplies and time. When the project gained traction, donations started trickling in. Then, out of nowhere, a large grant came through from a foundation she'd never heard of. No contact name, no fanfare, just enough funding to pay rent for a year and cover full-time staff. She tried to trace it, but the trail went cold after 2 layers of holding companies. She didn't push further. She didn't need to. The handwriting on the check stub looked familiar. When she asked him about it weeks later, Alexander didn't deny it. He just said, "I didn't do it for you. I did it for the people who'll walk through those doors and see what you see." The school opened in early spring. It occupied 2 floors of a refurbished building in Long Island City, light-filled rooms with wide windows, shelves full of donated supplies, and walls already covered in student work within the first month. Sophia taught 3 classes a week and let the rest of the schedule fill itself in. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. And it was hers. Alexander came to the opening ceremony but stood in the back, away from the cameras. She caught his eye only once that day, and they shared a look that said more than anything they'd ever said in front of other people. A year passed. They spent it together but apart enough to stay themselves. She traveled for a short residency in Chicago. He expanded a European branch of the company but made time to visit. They didn't move in together, didn't rush towards some packaged ending. But by the end of that year, it was clear either of them wanted to keep orbiting in separate paths. On a warm evening in early September, he asked her to take a weekend trip. No destination listed, just a folded note with a small sketch inside, 2 chairs at a dock, one slightly turned toward the other. When they pulled up to the lake resort, she didn't speak for a full minute. The buildings had been renovated, the signage replaced, but the bones were the same. She walked slowly to the water's edge and stood where she'd stood all those years ago, watching the late light scatter across the surface. He joined her a few moments later. They sat together, like they had in the sketch, saying nothing at first. Then he pulled something from his pocket, a small, simple box, and held it out without ceremony. Inside was a ring. Thin gold band. No stones. Just a tiny engraving on the inside curve, August. She looked at him, and he didn't launch into a speech. Just said, "We started something here. I'd like to keep building it with you." She took the ring without answering. Slipped it on her finger. Then kissed him, slow and certain. That was her answer. A few weeks later, she visited his office for the first time in months. The same office where all of this had started. He made a few changes, added a few new paintings, replaced the rug, moved the desk slightly to face more of the window. It felt less like a stage and more like someone's real space now. He opened the drawer. Inside were 2 photographs, both in matching frames. The first was the old one, the snapshot of her at 19, mid-laugh, unaware. The second was new. A photo Naomi had taken at the school during a painting class, Sophia with a brush in hand, talking to one of the students, half covered in charcoal smudges, smiling like she just solved something no one else could see. He looked at her. "Still think you were just a muse?" She smiled. "No." Then leaned in and kissed him, one hand still resting on the drawer. "You're the artist now," he said. "I'm just lucky to be in your portrait." And this time, she believed it completely. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to leave a like, it really helps out the channel. And if you want more heartwarming and emotional stories like this, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this one. I'd love to hear your reactions. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.